Project. Chinese man lives 256 years, verified. Unlock DNA yourself. Latest leak project with Aage Nost. Thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is Aage Nost from AAGENOST.com. Time travel, immortality, quantum physics, the paranormal, mind over matter, and the Akashic Records hard drive of life. With an encyclopedia as a resume and a fascinating life path thus far, we will be discussing several topics of great interest and fascination. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Well, I'm doing fine.
Awesome. Now we
Excellent.
we talked a couple of times off the air, and we were able to put this together today. And you've just got such an incredible life path thus far. I mean, you're from Europe. You've really done a lot of research into things that are little known but very important. So, if you would, for our audience, give us a brief description about yourself, and then we'll jump into time travel and all this incredible stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I would say first that I've always been outside of the box thinker. In fact, I kind of joke about this, saying, I'm so far outside of the box, I don't even know where the box is anymore. First you said you mentioned my website first, and I need to correct that just briefly. That is AAGE-NOST.com. There's a dash in the middle between my names there, and then everything is good.
Thank you. Yeah, much appreciated. That way, because people want to know how to get in connections a lot of times with the guests that I have, so I'm glad you clarified that.
Yes. And there is 1,500 pictures of really strange stuff there, and a lot of articles and posts and things that you're not supposed to know about. So just bring it up and you'll have some fun. Anyway, I was born and raised in Europe on a farm over there, back in the dark ages. And at the age of 25, I came to the U.S. to go to flight school and did that and flew for a living for 23 years. And then I started doing other stuff, and it's been quite a ride. I've been so lucky. I've been able to do a lot of the things that other people just dream about. And, you mentioned time travel. That's one fun thing that I have researched a lot, and I in the back of my book, actually, I explain how to do it using the mind. And, in fact, in 2003, BBC Television came over to the U.S. and interviewed Michio Kaku and Green and several other theoretical physicists and myself on the issue of time travel and how practical it is. On that video, I demonstrated a little electronics device that I have, and talked about some of the strange experiences that I've had with it. So, this is one thing that it's hard to wrap our heads around, but if we start researching it, we're going to end up wondering, is this possible? Because our mind has been so conditioned and so lied to and so misrepresented over the decades and the millennia that we really don't know how to use our mind, even, especially when it comes to even a simple thing like immortality. Is it possible? Well, I've found that it is, and if you want me to, I can talk a little bit about that and explain exactly what people are doing that is reversing the aging process and so on. So
that'd be great.
Go where you want me to go here.
So Ray Kurzweil is a big advocate of the transhuman movement, immortality, and he kind of sees things more as, at least in my opinion, from what I've gathered, it seems like he sees things more of a robotic interference that's going to create these life extension technologies. I've heard that he takes a ton of supplements also, but it's going to be fascinating to see what the future holds. And I've heard a little bit about the reverse aging process and the DNA, how there's just a couple of parts of the DNA that really make it so we age the way that we do. And if you could get into that with us, that would be incredible.
Okay, I will go there. And then what I'm suggesting to the listeners is that grab a piece of paper and a pen, because I'm going to be giving you some things and some names and some possibly a website where you can go and look at it, and maybe a couple of books, so you can start to do your own research. And the word immortality is such that we really don't know what it means. Well, we kind of think that, at least spiritually, the essence of the mind that lives on forever. But physically, well, yeah, could it be? Well, it seems like it actually is, because in 2009, 3 doctors were given the Nobel Prize for discovering an enzyme that reverses the aging process, and nobody seems to know about it. Well,
Well,
I can understand why that is covered up. You can imagine what would happen to Social Security and all the pension programs if people quit dying, can't you?
Well, I mean, not only that, but right now I hear so many complaints in these upper echelons about how there's too many people on the planet already. And in realistic fashion, if you look at the graphs over the past 100 years, I mean, there has been just this huge jump in population. So if people can live to be 1,000 years old or never die, essentially, then I can see certain people that control the strings at the top levels that also profit a lot on death, also being like, well, hey, there's going to be so many people here that we're not going to have anything and we're not going to be able to control them. So it seems to me like a lot of it's a control factor.
Oh, absolutely. That has a lot to do with it. And just if people quit dying, that's we got to think about what will we do. If you let's say that you've been working at your job for 12 years by now and you're totally bored stiff, could you handle another 250,000 years at the job? No, probably not. But the thing is that there are some things here that actually seems to work. Immortality has become possible. Now, there are several different ways to do this, and one of them is I read in a technical magazine here, I think about a month or two ago, they're talking about downloading the mind into a computer, or actually the recorded memory into a computer, and then transfer that into a Wi-Fi connected computer in an Android, and suddenly you have a new body that won't wear out, hopefully, with the same recorded memories that you have. That technology is coming online. It will be there very shortly. But there are other ways, and I prefer to do it the natural way. Now, the Sumerian tablets, they talk about people that lived for 300,000 years, and they explain what did it for them. They were using something called the white powdered gold, and what we call anyway. But there are some humans have a tremendous capacity for old age if we know how to do it. Let me tell you a quick story. Back in the mid 50s, 1950s, excuse me, there was a Chinese university professor that came to New York, and there was an exchange program with a New York professor went to China. It was a cultural exchange type of thing. And the Chinese university professor, he went out with his colleagues one evening and they had dinner. He got food poisoning and died. And of course, then he ended up at the morgue and they started looking through his papers and they said there's something wrong here. So they called the ambassador and said, what's wrong with this man's papers? He showed that he's 154 years old. That can't be. And the ambassador told him that, well, yeah, he's 154. And they asked him, how can that be? Well, first the ambassador told him he did not believe he could die. And secondarily, he only ate Chinese herbs and berries.
No
Now
Big
that
Macs.
tells, yeah, no Big Mac. And that tells us something. And I did some more research, and I found another Chinese gentleman. He was 256 years old when he died from an accident. And his papers and his age has been verified by the government. And he was a martial art instructor for the Chinese army for as long as anybody alive could remember. But he got caught up in an accident. He got killed. And I found out, did some more research, and I dug and I found out, what did this guy eat? You want to know?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I tell you, this particular program is actually working because I'm doing it, and it seems to be working for me because this thing that's called crow's feet. I imagine you probably don't worry about those, but I had a few of them, and they're going away. And these are the wrinkles at the edge of the eye. So yeah, it is something seems to be happening here. Now this man in China that was 256 years old, he ate something called ling shi, goji berries, wild ginseng, and also part of his food was he shou wu. It's an herb, and also he took gotu kola, and the most important one was astragalus. And I have done some research on that, and I found also there's some medical research coming out of the U.S. now that astragalus, it will help to reverse the aging process if it is taken in the large doses, and get a magnifying effect if you take it with the wild ginseng at the same time. So there is something here happening, and then I'm sure it wasn't the only thing he ate. They probably did some other things too, but that was the most important part, I think. And I have a regiment that I worked out for myself where I take these things, and I've been doing it for probably a little over 6 months, 8, 9 months now, something like that. And I do see a difference.
It sounds to me also like the mindset has to be so. I mean, you've just got to be dialed in to think that, okay, no death in your mind, essentially, because it is mind over matter, in my opinion. And I've seen
Yes.
some amazing things with people and what they can do with their minds. So that makes a lot of sense. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is actually. And when we think about the mind, we got to also, even back in the 90s when they did the Genome Project,
Right?
they came up with a solution to why do we age and die. They came up with the three reasons for it. They came up with one. I have, in fact, I have a paper that was given to me by one of the people that run the Genome Project way back then. It was not for public display, but I have it. And in there they explain one of them is a nutritional deficiency. Obviously, if we don't give the body what it needs to replenish itself, it just won't do that, and we'll have a problem. Then we have a genetic disorder. And that goes back to what I'm doing right now, because that is the problem with the cells dividing and the telomeres at the end of the chromosome shortening every time that the cell divide. And when it shortens so much, when we get a little, chronological age to us, it's duplicated itself so many times, it shortened the telomeres to the point where they are no longer able to hold the chromosomes together, so they start fraying at the end, and then the cells are no longer able to divide and replicate themselves, and we get stuck with old cells in the body and not able to create new ones, so we get old and we die. Now, the third thing that the Genome Project came up with is, it's going to be a little tough for some people, but it's a mental illness. Some people may not look kindly on this particular thing, but they said religion is the mental illness. Let's think about that. They might be right. And let's say that you keep eating poison food all your life, it will eventually kill you. If you keep believing the wrong things, that you are going to grow old and you will die, that will probably kill you too. Or think of it like if when we get old, we get sick sometimes because we eat the wrong things and we do the wrong things and think the wrong things, and then we get old and we get arthritis, we get pains everywhere, we get all bent over and we're hurting all over. And the religions tell us that when you get old, you are going to die and you're going to go to this better place. So when you got all these diseases and hurts and everything, that better place starts to sound pretty good, doesn't it? So the mind draws you to that better place, and that ushers you out the door. Would that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And it also, when you've got so many people that think the same thing, it kind of creates that archetype and it puts more power and energy into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the mastermind. And it's very powerful. That is this not just you, because we got to remember what we are also. We're not just bones and flesh and bones and blood and hangnails. We are really maybe not that at all. Maybe we are all mind. There are several people that has written very extensively on that, and they will be able to prove it. So when we talk about old, this guy in China, 256 years old, he had 23 wives and over 200 children over his lifetime. If, I mean, he was born, according to the official records, in 1677, I seem to remember. And it was written up in the New York Times back in the 1930s also, and they considered it to be real. And there's so many things when we start thinking about these things. The physical, I think you're right. It is all mind directed.
Let me ask you this: If do you feel that if, let's say, an entire country started to have that group think, that mastermind, and changed their diet, got rid of virtually all the GMOs and aspartame and medicines that actually cause more damage than good, etc. I mean, do you think that that could actually reverse the entire human population, essentially, kind of like the 100 monkey syndrome?
I think you got it right there. We just saw an example of it in the elections. People were sick of corruption. Donald had rallies with 30 to 50, 75,000 people in it, and his opponent had some 70 people showing up.
And they were
We
all paid
saw the
by her.
yeah, the mind created something that wasn't supposed to happen according to the people behind the curtain that pulls the strings.
I've heard both sides of this before. I've heard that Trump was actually designated to get in and this was all charades. I look back at the previous elections where Obama gets in office because he promises change 8 years ago, and that's what people wanted. People want to change. So Donald Trump, in essence, did the same thing, but he's just a different archetype, but he's promising change. And I'm even watching Fox News today for a couple, like literally 2 minutes, and then I just couldn't stand it anymore. But once in a while, I like to flip on there and see the headlines. And it essentially said that Donald Trump is going to tax like 30% or 35% to companies that decide to go offshore and then ship stuff back home because they think it's cheaper for labor. And if that's true, and if he's really going to make this country great again as far as a nationality, I can respect that, and I think that that's fantastic. It almost makes me think that this was kind of designed many years ago by some very powerful and influential people that have that powerful thought that can think into creation, essentially. You could call them sorcerers or wizards or whatever, I mean, just people that are very powerful at a mental level. And if it's all mental, then that makes even more sense. I think Donald Trump is actually going to usher in a new world war. I think that that's what my mind is telling me now that he's in office. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I do see a great war on the horizon now. And I didn't see that before. I kind of saw it as this globalist agenda where they'd always pretend that we're going to be on the verge of war, but in reality, because everybody's kind of playing ball together, except for maybe a few key components, that won't happen. Now I'm starting to think differently. What about you?
Well, I've had a little contemplation on this and kind of trying to look into the future a little bit. And Donald was not supposed to happen. That's the way I see it. And the same thing happened when we had a few years back we had a governor that ended up in Minnesota get elected in because of the corruption in the state. Gosh, what's his name? The yeah, I'll think of it in a second. He wasn't supposed to happen either, and there were Kennedy. He were one of theirs, Jack Kennedy. But when he got in the office, he turned on the handlers and he took the money system away from the Federal Reserve, and of course that got him killed. But there are some things that happens that is not planned, even though most of it is. And I think what he's talking about taxing the companies coming in from the outside, like U.S. companies setting up offshore affiliates, and then tax them coming in. That may be there's some legal issues there because the law says everybody has to be taxed equal. Though they can raise the import fees, so they could be done in that way. And personally, I'm not really opposed to that. I just let it happen. Keep it here. Keep it in the U.S. That's fine with me. I think that's good.
Well,
I don't
certainly there's a
see
lot
any
of
big
benefits
wars.
to that. Yeah, to the bringing more
Yeah.
jobs here at home for ourselves and our family and friends. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't see that war. I see Donald becoming very good friends with the Russians, and though they're going to build up the military even more, but everybody's doing that. So I think there's going to be that stalemate when it comes to the war for a while. Of course, the Muslims in the Middle East, they're going to keep doing their thing, and there will be some problems in the Middle East. There will be, it looks like it's going to be a war, a bigger one than it is now over there, but it's going to be a short one. But otherwise, I don't see it here in the U.S. And I'm going to stand on that, and I'm going to keep visualizing that. I don't want war
Please
beyond
do.
the sea.
It's interesting because I thought that Hillary actually was a shoo-in. I thought for sure she was going to make it. And if I look at my track record of people that I thought were going to get in office, I'm right most of the time. But this one I was just so far off on. So I can appreciate your thought process with that. And also you talk about time travel and the abilities that we have with our own minds. If we could get into some of that, that'd be incredible.
Yeah, we could do that. Time travel is, we all been told that time goes in one direction, right?
I've heard that
From the
before.
present into the future, and it doesn't back up. But in the back of my book, I explain a little bit about what time is, and in fact, how to manipulate it and how to get glimpses of the future, and in fact, do some things in the past that normally we wouldn't think is possible. And I would say there's several books out there that really speak goods on this, and one of them is The Field and the Intention Experiment by Lynn McTaggart. And that is an excellent book. There's another one, The Entangled Minds by Dean Radin. And he explained where there are some experiments that prove future events can be averted. In fact, he talks of the fact that we can go back and change the past. Now, that's a little tough to wrap our heads around, isn't it? If
Well,
we,
I was just going to say real quick, I remember talking to Wal Thornhill once. He's a very good researcher on the electric universe, and he brought up the time thing. He said, well, people say time is linear, but I don't see the time moving anyway. Which you show me the direction, prove it to me. It could be all directions, so that's a good point.
hmm Well, if we think about what we are, I'll tell you what, in order to understand time travel, let's maybe talk a little bit about what we are, what time is first, and then then it'll be easier to understand the time travel concept. Let's say that we, or should I start this one up? Maybe let me ask a question, and first I need to set the stage so they will be able to understand the question better. Let's say that science has found that matter and energy cannot be created from nothing. We know that. We're told that.
Right.
Then again, we have some of the sharpest people on the planet, like Stephen Hawking out of Cambridge University in England, and the most theoretical physicists. They are now saying that their equations on the blackboard will prove this universe was created from nothing. And if this whole universe was created from nothing, and you are in this universe created from nothing, what are you? I paused on purpose there because I want you to think.
That
What
makes
are
me,
we?
that makes me think that nothing is everything and everything is nothing.
That's pretty close. Because if you think on that for a little bit, then there's only one thing that can actually do that, create something out of nothing, and that is thought, the mind. And of course, that raises another question: what is the mind? Where is it? Is it in the brain or is it somewhere else? Well, the brain is actually the kind of the hardware. The mind is the software that is laid on top of the hardware to make the hardware do what it does. But the mind, is not the brain. See, we were never taught how to use our mind. It's a phenomenal tool, but we were never taught how to use it because nobody knew how to teach us how to use it. Remember back in school when the teacher told you, read this chapter and memorize it because tomorrow you're going to have a test on it. Oh, God, I hated that. And I wasn't sure I was going to be able to remember everything. We have perfect memory, though, of everything that we experience. Is the recall process that is all screwed up. See, some 20 some years ago, I was very lucky. I was able to travel around the country, teach a mind development course that taught us how to use the mind, how to assimilate information out of a book at the rate of 50 to 100,000 words a minute with 95% retention. And that course was Zox Pro, ZOXPRO, and they're still doing it. It is
You,
a
you know,
phenomenal mind tool.
can I just jump in real quick? And I'm sorry to interrupt. Why isn't that stuff used in school? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that people should be taught when they're like 5 years old,
Or before. Yeah, exactly.
in the womb.
But the thing is, the school unions are so powerful. That's a jobs program. And since we're talking about that, what the inventor, or more of the founder of this course, that was what he did was he took it to the school system in Phoenix and said, "Give me 7 of your most fledgling students." and he got the D's and the F's. He got 7 of them. He educated them for 1 week, and they went back to school, and they jumped straight to A's and B's. And the people at the school, they told him, that sounds wonderful. We really like to look into this, but don't call us. We'll call you. They wanted no part of it because, think of it, if you had kids that was that smart, what in the world do you need teachers for?
Well, and then you can't have them sit in a classroom setting like that for 8 hours a day. And I know that there's just a
Yep,
handful of corporations that control the majority of the books and the
yep,
product that's actually sold to the school systems.
yep, that's right. And, you will have kids at the age of 12 with PhDs, and that just don't work very well, So it is something that is very difficult to implement, but think of the mind capacity of those kids going through life. We would have a totally different society if this was implemented. But that's why it's mostly business people, executives, and people with means and people that is willing to look outside the box that go through this type of education.
Now, are you able to read like that as well?
It's not really a form of reading because it's too fast for reading. You're not able to move your eyes that fast. What you do, you set yourself up so you open up a channel into the subconscious mind, and you stare through the page and you take a mental picture of it, and that totally bypasses the conscious mind and go directly into long-term memory. So when you're done turning the pages as fast as you can turn them, when you then there is a little mind technique to it where you slow down the mind so you get an extra amount of alpha brainwave pattern that you use, and that opens up the channel to the subconscious mind. And then you don't remember a thing after you're done. But now you can ask questions, you use triggers, and there you pull the string so everything comes out of long-term memory up to conscious understanding. So that's really, it's fairly simple, though it is not easy. It takes a little bit of practice, and you got to do it for a while. But that Zox Pro training is something that I learned a lot from, and it is responsible for many of the things that I've been able to do later on.
So once you learn how to kind of tap into the subconscious mind, does that
Yeah.
give you the ability to change time in essence?
That is a little that the subconscious mind is it's kind of an enigma that is not very well understood. That's part of the brain and part of the mind. The subconscious mind usually reaches into the superconscious mind to get more of the information that you do not have in the brain. So it's kind of a symbiosis between the two of them, but you can, through the subconscious mind, you can go and you can actually, let me set an example. Let's say that you did something really stupid in the past, and you'd like to go back and have a do-over, change that. Boy, I have my hand up, man, oh man, I've done a lot of stupid things. There is actually a way that this could be done. Let me try to explain what I have found by investigating this quite a bit. And science now start talking like I do too, so they're starting to confirm some of it. Let's say that on Christmas Eve 5 years ago, you did something really stupid. Okay, now go back to a time before that event when that decision was made. Visualize yourself there and visualize yourself planning for that particular event and that decision. Visualize yourself making a different decision. And now we got to remember where this request for things to happen go. It doesn't stay in the physical, it goes out of the physical, so it's a different language. It is not English or German or Bulgarian anymore. Now it is a language of emotion, intention, a language of vivid, colorful pictures, love. That's the language of the spiritual world, or anything up in the higher vibration beyond the physical. So when you redesign that picture of that event with that decision in it, and you consciously then and subconsciously put those pictures into the universe by going a different direction after making a different decision, it is very likely you could end up making a different decision when that time comes up. Now, there we have another concept that kind of makes it difficult to understand, because if you make a different decision and go in a different direction, what happened to the old timeline that was there with the bad decision in it? Well, there's two schools of thought on that, and one of them is that when you end up with a new timeline, the old timeline collapses, and it never existed. You probably heard several theoretical physicists talk about that. But there is another school of thought which I now are subscribing to, and that is that when you start a new timeline, you go on, your major conscious awareness stays in that timeline, and you totally forget the old timeline existed. That barrier goes up, but the old timeline continues. So there is one of you there also that will continue into its future. Are you with me?
Absolutely.
All right. And if we do this, it is technically possible to go back and have a do-over. But if that is successful, we will never know that it was a do-over, because we will forget that we did that bad decision in the first place.
Do you think that that could be powerful enough, essentially, to literally rewrite the timeline, kind of like in the butterfly effect?
I absolutely think so. I think that is very possible. And I think it's probably happened many times.
Do you think that there's
There is an
technologies?
experiment.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think there's technologies that could be used to kind of activate the mind that way, so people wouldn't have to be so in tune with themselves as far as like a meditation standpoint goes?
Yeah, I think there are. I think some of the dark projects within the research departments of the hidden government, they are working on this, and they have perfected time travel. Well, if you look at the past, fairly recent, a few years back, they opened up a tomb in China that has been sealed for, nobody had been in that tomb for, I think it was about 700 or 800 years, and they found a Swiss watch in it.
Yeah, and then there's all those
You know,
artifacts that Michael Cremos put together where they found artifacts that are hundreds of millions of years old. Like, and I know in Oklahoma
yeah,
even they found this brick wall that had this very white type brick that was very polished. It was underneath these coal deposits that are over 100 million years old, and people can't even explain that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it could be one of two things. It could be maybe we've just redone this multiple times. There's been the cosmic reset button, and few people made it through those cataclysms, and maybe they kept the technologies going and improving, etc. But then the majority of the population would have to start over. It'd be like a reset. So those are some great thoughts. I'm glad you're bringing this up.
yeah, and you're exactly right, because there has been many civilizations that has gone down the tube and had to start over again. And I'm glad. I'm hoping we have avoided this one going down the tube by maybe going a different direction, because Hillary, she promised the Second World War. I mean, the Third World War. She said, "Yep, I have no problem with that," because she was going to attack the Syrians, and the Russians would have a very dim view of that.
Right. Well,
So
Syria looks terrible already. I mean, Damascus is in ruins.
yeah, I think everybody should just say, "Oh, heck with it, let's go home."
Yeah,
We have no business there in the first place.
I
Now,
agree.
when we're talking about time travel, there is an experiment that I'd like to mention, and that is it's written up in this book. What's the book? Spontaneous Evolution by Bruce Lipton, and I think the other guy is Steve Behrman. They speak on a scientific experiment where the subjects were hooked up to biometric sensors, which registers physical and emotional reactions to visual stimuli. And they showed a succession of pictures as slides. Most of them were very pleasant. They had green pastures, kittens and puppy dogs and all kinds of nice things like that. But in the stream of pictures, there were 3 out of 100, 3%, that was gruesome pictures of violence, decapitations, and nasty stuff. And when they ran this sequence, they could see from the electronics that was hooked up to the guy's head, and they were measuring the brainwave patterns about 2 to 6 seconds before the really nasty pictures came up. The brain had a violent reaction in the area of fear, where they show fear in the brain. But the picture hadn't showed up yet. So the brain or the mind knew the future 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds in advance. That tells us that there is a bridge between the future and the present. When you see a thing like that, that proves that the theory of the time goes from the present into the future only is not correct. It can go backwards. And if you think about that one, how far back can it go? It all depends on the mind and maybe some electronic equipment. That little box that I haven't done much with it lately, but I had some really, really strange experiences with it. And I tell you, these things can be done. And it's all up to people themselves that is interested in these things to go out and research it. And in the back of my book, I talk about time travel, and that is, if you go to the website, you'll find it there. I made a post of it so you can see it. And that is something that, if nothing, experiment with. Let me tell you another quick story, 40 seconds, and that'll do it. Because the guy that made that little electronic equipment that I have, he sold one of those also to a young man in the United States. And the man got it in the mail. He went up to his bedroom. He was going to college at the time, and he lived at home. So he went up to his mom said, come down for dinner, and he said okay. And when dinner came, he didn't come down. And then they went up to the room and to call him down for dinner, and they looked up in his room, and there this electronic equipment was sitting in the middle of the bed, and he was gone. And he never ever showed up anywhere after that. Anywhere. He was gone. Of course, the parents were investigated, for not charged with murder, but they were suspected, and all kinds of stuff happened. But the kid was gone. Things like this happens, but it's not very well published.
What do you think about the spontaneous combustion that happens to some people?
Yeah, that is I've heard two different theories on that, and I've heard on a couple of incidents where they were the people that did it. They were doing a hydrogen peroxide treatment, and hydrogen peroxide is flammable somewhat.
Right.
And I don't know if that's going to explain it though, because in one incident, just the feet burned up and the body was okay. So there is things, but I think what it appears to me is like it is an interdimensional thing that comes through with an energy that consumes the body.
Now,
so
okay,
yeah.
so you think it's like an interdimensional thing then?
I believe there is something that comes, an energy from the outside of the physical that attaches itself to the body somehow and have that effect on it. That's what I seem to understand.
Okay. And I'm looking at your book right now on your website. And once again, for those that have an opportunity to listen to this podcast, check out aage-nost.com. The book that we're talking about, Spiritual Science, is available there, Higher Conscious Thinking, and How to Access the Universal Consciousness. Now, I have personally had out-of-body experiences. I've had some incredible astral projection experiences that are even outside of the time zone. I've learned how to do that. And so I can definitely say without a shadow of a doubt, we're more than our physical bodies, yet the encounters that you're talking about where you can actually physically change things at a mental level is something that's even further than that. And man, I can just imagine the possibilities. So where I'm going with this is into the next segment here. We could talk about the quantum entanglement and how we're all connected at a quantum level, essentially, and how that can explain some of the paranormal and other things. But what's your take on the holographic universe theory and everything being at a holographic nature almost?
Well, you almost covered it all actually here. I tell you, you are so right spot on with this, because when you're talking about your travels outside of the physical body, it's very possible to do, and it's not that hard to learn. I speak about that in the book too. And the holographic universe is probably as close as we can explain it, because it all goes back to the mind. The mind will replace the computer that runs the hologram in, holographic technology now has been experimented probably about, what do you think, 60 years or something like that?
Okay.
And they're doing some amazing things right now. They have created holograms now that seems to be acting on its own and thinking on its own through the computer behind it. And our mind is the same way. We have been given this mind that we haven't been taught how to use, and some of us are discovering more of it than others. So what I'm thinking here is that when the mind creates something, it is somewhat similar to a concept that I want to mention in this connection. That's hypnosis. Um, let's say that I set you down in a soft, comfortable chair, and I talked to you for 20 minutes. And I told you that when you wake up, you will see an elephant standing in the room next to you. I woke you up, and if I did my job right, you would see the elephant. You would reach out and touch the trunk on that elephant, and that trunk would seem solid. You could feel the ripples in the skin of it. But I couldn't see it because obviously there was no elephant there. Now, this concept of seeing is believing goes right out the window because you see that thing and it's real to you, but there's no elephant there. What's the difference between that and the life that we are living? It is seeming so real to us. When you run through a field and you stub your toe, it hurts like something that, yeah, it feels real. And this is all mind created, just like the hypnotic trance that you may have gotten into there when you see the elephant. But it is directed by the mind. Our mind is part of the universal mind. Let's say there's a good way to compare that, and that is the universal mind is something, it is the one. It is the source of all things. But then we pop up. You pop up over there, I pop up over here, but we are part of this universal mind. It's kind of similar to if you plant, let's say, a tree that spreads itself by its roots in the middle of an open field. Now you plant that tree. 5 years later, you're going to have a few more trees around that one because the roots spread. 20 years later, you're going to have a whole bunch of small trees out there. And they all look like different trees, but they are the same organism with above ground different expressions of it. We are the same. We are the universal mind, have access to all knowledge and resources and capabilities that the universal mind have once we learn how to go and find it. And we look so separate, just like the trees, but we are one at our mind level. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense. And what I'd like to ask you then is essentially, if you think about it, when we're looking at somebody else or something else that we don't like, that's just a reflection or I don't know, it's like a copy of a copy of a copy, and it's all a part of this same hologram that we're residing in. So it's very interesting. I wonder if, that's kind of made me think about things, and this is kind of deep here for a second. So we live in a world right now that's very dualistic. I mean, there's so much good, yet there's so much evil as well. And it seems like you have to have this balance where, okay, in order to see the light, you've got to have darkness, etc. So what would it be like if there was no pain, no suffering, no evil, no contrast, and everything was all the same? Would that be like the Borg? Or, I mean, just what do we do to make it get rid of evil, yet at the same time not be completely assimilated into nothingness?
Well, you mentioned it got deep, and it did get deep on us.
I got to put my boots on this shit. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, darn it. I'm sitting here barefoot. I mean, that's a rough one. I would probably say that yes, there is no such thing as darkness. It is only absence of light. Because then, if there is no light, obviously there is no light, which would create darkness, which is nothing. Light is something. Even Albert Einstein, he said that in his later years, that I have found that there is nothing in this universe except for one thing, and that is love. So he woke up towards the end of his life. And if we are only a mind-created illusion, the two things uh, uh, kind of plan our future for us. The mastermind or the masses, all these trees above the ground, they are affecting each other. If you have a really strong wind and one topple over, it's going to maybe touch the other one and topple that one too. So we are at the mastermind level, we are together. And we make decisions at the mastermind level at the same time we make decisions at our individual expression of that universal mind. And being without negativity, that is all a function of mind. If we think about negative things, boy oh boy, we're going to have it. If you think about problems, you're going to have more of them. If you bury yourself in the problem-solving solution, you will find solutions. And that's where the media and the governments and so on, they need problems. Without problems, we would start thinking on our own, thinking good things, and start realizing that maybe we don't need them as much.
Well, we're certainly in this perpetual fear-based society. If you turn
Yeah,
on the TV, what sells? Fear sells, and people get engulfed in that, so they feed it. And I personally feel that there's things behind the scenes that we don't see with our physical eyes. I mean, we're seeing about 0.01% of the electromagnetic light spectrum, and that's if we're lucky, because oftentimes our brain filters out about 50% of that. So,
yeah,
I mean, I wonder if there's these things that literally feed off of this energy, whether it's positive or negative. Maybe there's evil energy suckers and positive energy suckers. I don't know, but it just certainly feels sometimes like there's something else behind the scenes kind of orchestrating. And whether it's our consciousness, whether it's our ancestors, once again, it's all a part of ourself. We are all one, etc. But yet we're not. So it's like we're individual drops in the ocean. And once we're in the ocean, it's pretty hard to separate each individual drop, but you can do it once it goes outside of that medium. So this is just fascinating stuff to think about. And I
yeah.
really like how you brought up, if you're thinking good thoughts, if you're thinking about solutions and you're putting yourself there, that's what you're going to manifest. If you're thinking about negative stuff all the time, that's what you're going to manifest, because you get what you put out essentially in the universe. The universe is giving you what you're asking for.
Absolutely. And yeah, you're right. And I think that the negative things that happens to us is all mind created. And the influences from the outside that you mentioned, yeah, they are thought forms. And I know the Christians call them demon and several other things. And yeah, the term is that's fine. That's okay. It doesn't define it up and beyond that. But the negative, what we call negative thought forms, they are also created by the mind, because to the spark of life that creates us, the universal mind gives us an individualized perceptive spark of life, which some people call soul, and that portion of the mind creates our physical existence. But to that spark of life, there is no such thing as negative experiences or positive experiences. It doesn't differentiate. It is all experiences. And it wants these experiences. They want the really ecstatically good experiences, as well as it wants to experience what we in the physical would call a negative experience or bad experience. So at that level of the soul or the spark of life, it is just an experience. Because at that level, our whole lifetime of however old you are or you want to be, let's say you're 188 when you die, that lifetime is just a split moment and it is over. And that's why, you heard the saying, oh gosh, that was so horrible. My whole life passed before my eyes. It actually, when someone drops the body and leave the body and go home, so to speak, that happens. The whole life is replayed either right before or right after the time of death, which is actually not the time you quit breathing, it's a little bit after. But the whole lifetime is replayed in its entirety, in detail, and you will have the experience of the people that you interact with in connection with that replaying of that lifetime. Whatever you did something good for someone, you will feel their joy. When you hurt somebody really bad, you will experience their horror and their bad feelings. So that's what the Christians are talking about when they say you go before God and you're going to be judged. Well, who is God? According to the Bible, even it says in John and in Psalms, I think I seem to remember, it says that you are God. So we are part of God. So we judge ourselves when all that is replayed. And you may find that you did so many things that was not completed enough to be a complete experience for the spark of life. It did not quite get the experience is expected or wanted, so you may have to go back and do some things over again in a new lifetime with a new incarnation. That is what I saw.
I've got to say, I mean, the way that you put that together is just so eloquent, and I really appreciate you coming on the show with us today. I wish that we could spend more time together. Hopefully I can get you back on the show again, because this is just so powerful, and man, it just really, in my opinion, brings a sense of ease and peace to mind when you talk
Yes.
this way, because it's all a part of the cycle. You know, we're all in this together, and once the sooner we realize that we're in this together and quit fighting over stupid things and quit letting these divisions happen. It's like a division upon division upon division. Yes, we need to be individuals and have our own opinions. That's very powerful in my book. But at the same time, to fight over stuff that doesn't really matter, I mean, what's the point?
And we can direct it. We can actually decide what's going to happen in the future, and we can make that happen. There's a process that I've been using, and that is to design the future before you have to live it. And there's no limitations to what you can create, and you can make it happen.
Awesome.
So maybe another time we could talk about that.
That would be great. I would recommend our audience go to aage-nost.com. Pick up your copy of Spiritual Science, Higher Conscious Thinking, and How to Access the Universal Consciousness. Mr. Nost, this has been a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show with us.
Oh, I had fun.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Time travel experiments, immortality, mind over matter, Genome Project, Chinese man lives 256 years, verified, unlock DNA yourself. Latest leak project with Aage Nost. Thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is Aage Nost from AAGENOST.com. Time travel, immortality, quantum physics, the paranormal, mind over matter, and the Akashic Records hard drive of life. With an encyclopedia as a resume and a fascinating life path thus far, we will be discussing several topics of great interest and fascination. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Well, I'm doing fine.
Awesome. Now we
Excellent.
we talked a couple of times off the air, and we were able to put this together today. And you've just got such an incredible life path thus far. I mean, you're from Europe. You've really done a lot of research into things that are little known but very important. So, if you would, for our audience, give us a brief description about yourself, and then we'll jump into time travel and all this incredible stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I would say first that I've always been outside of the box thinker. In fact, I kind of joke about this, saying, I'm so far outside of the box, I don't even know where the box is anymore. But oh yes, first you said you mentioned my website first, and I need to correct that just briefly. That is AAGE-NOST.com. There's a dash in the middle between my names there, and then everything is good.
Thank you. Yeah, much appreciated. That way, because people want to know how to get in connections a lot of times with the guests that I have, so I'm glad you clarified that.
Yes. And there is 1,500 pictures of really strange stuff there, and a lot of articles and posts and things that you're not supposed to know about. So just bring it up, and you'll have some fun. Anyway, I was born and raised in Europe on a farm over there, back in the dark ages. And at the age of 25, I came to the U.S. to go to flight school, and did that and flew for a living for 23 years. And then I started doing other stuff, and it's been quite a ride. I've been so lucky. I've been able to do a lot of the things that other people just dream about. And, well, you mentioned time travel. That's one fun thing that I have researched a lot, and I in the back of my book, actually, I explain how to do it using the mind. And in fact, in 2003, BBC Television came over to the U.S. and interviewed Michio Kaku and Green and several other theoretical physicists and myself on the issue of time travel and how practical it is. On that video, I demonstrated a little electronics device that I have, and some talked about some of the strange experiences that I've had with it. So, this is one thing that it's hard to wrap our heads around. But if we start researching it, we're going to end up wondering, is this possible? Because our mind has been so conditioned and so lied to and so misrepresented over the decades and the millennia that we really don't know how to use our mind, even, especially when it comes to even a simple thing like immortality. Is it possible? Well, I've found that it is, and if you want me to, I can talk a little bit about that and explain exactly what people are doing that is reversing the aging process and so on. So
That'd be
I'll just
great.
go where you want me to go here.
So Ray Kurzweil is a big advocate of the transhuman movement, immortality, and he kind of sees things more as, at least in my opinion, from what I've gathered, it seems like he sees things more of a robotic interference that's going to create these life extension technologies. I've heard that he takes a ton of supplements also, but it's going to be fascinating to see what the future holds. And I've heard a little bit about the reverse aging process and the DNA, how there's just a couple of parts of the DNA that really make it so we age the way that we do. And if you could get into that with us, that would be incredible.
Okay, I will go there, and then what I'm suggesting to the listeners is that grab a piece of paper and a pen, because I'm going to be giving you some things and some names and some possibly a website where you can go and look at it, and maybe a couple of books, so you can start to do your own research. And the word immortality is such that we really don't know what it means. Well, we kind of think that, at least spiritually, the essence of the mind that lives on forever. But physically, well, yeah, could it be? Well, it seems like it actually is, because in 2009, three doctors were given the Nobel Prize for discovering an enzyme that reverses the aging process, and nobody seems to know about it. Well,
Well,
I can understand why that is covered up. You can imagine what would happen to Social Security and all the pension programs if people quit dying, can't you?
Well, I mean, not only that, but right now I hear so many complaints in these upper echelons about how there's too many people on the planet already. And in realistic fashion, if you look at the graphs over the past 100 years, I mean, there has been just this huge jump in population. So if people can live to be 1,000 years old or never die, essentially, then I can see certain people that control the strings at the top levels that also profit a lot on death, also being like, well, hey, there's going to be so many people here that we're not going to have anything and we're not going to be able to control them. So it seems to me like a lot of it's a control factor.
Oh, absolutely. That has a lot to do with it. And just if people quit dying, that's we got to think about what will we do. Let's say that you've been working at your job for 12 years by now and you're totally bored stiff, could you handle another 250,000 years at the job? No, probably not. But the thing is that there are some things here that actually seems to work. Immortality has become possible. Now, there are several different ways to do this, and one of them is, I read in a technical magazine here, I think about a month or two ago, they're talking about downloading the mind into a computer, or actually the recorded memory into a computer, and then transfer that into a Wi-Fi connected computer in an Android, and suddenly you have a new body that won't wear out, hopefully, with the same recorded memories that you have. That technology is coming online. It will be there very shortly. But there are other ways, and I prefer to do it the natural way. Now, the Sumerian tablets, they talk about people that lived for 300,000 years, and they explain what did it for them. They were using something called the white powdered gold, and what we call it anyway. But there are some humans have a tremendous capacity for old age if we know how to do it. Let me tell you a quick story. Back in the mid 50s, 1950s, excuse me, there was a Chinese university professor that came to New York, and there was an exchange program with a New York professor went to China. It was a cultural exchange type of thing, and the Chinese university professor